Lying awake during a robbery, I was petrified but alert. The ticking sound I heard after midnight was real, not a figment of my imagination. Alone in the house, with my parents away in Paris and only my grandmother visiting daily, I felt incredibly vulnerable. As the intruder's footsteps neared my room, my heart raced. I instinctively covered myself with the blanket and held my breath, feigning sleep while concealing my fear. The thief entered my room, turning on the light, his presence palpable. He lingered by the door for what felt like forever before finally leaving. I emerged from under the blanket, gasping for air. Determined not to let him rob us, I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering my situation. They instructed me to stay put, but I couldn't just wait. Cautiously, I crept into the hallway and toward my parents' bedroom, where I saw the robber rummaging through drawers. Overhearing him on the phone, he reassured someone that the child is asleep and he would take the jewelry. Hearing him refer to me as the child and his plan to steal our belongings filled me with a mix of anger and fear. I knew I had to act smartly and stay safe until the police arrived. My only hope was that they would get there in time to catch the thief and prevent him from taking anything valuable or harming anyone. As I listened to the thief's conversation, I learned about his next target, Ruby's house. Ruby, the head cheerleader and most sought-after girl in school, was known for her beauty and her family's wealth, which also made her quite arrogant. I, like many others, had a crush on her, but she never paid attention to anyone from high school. Startled by my accidental step on a squeaky shoe in the hallway, I quickly hid in the kitchen. The police arrived shortly, but the thief had already fled with my mom's jewelry. The next day at school, I felt a sense of urgency to warn Ruby about the impending robbery. However, when I approached her, she mocked me in front of her friends. Her dismissive and mean attitude discouraged me. I almost decided not to warn her about the robbery, feeling frustrated and angry. I contemplated informing the police but feared the thief might retaliate against me, knowing I was awake during the robbery at my house. Ruby's continuous mockery over the next few days only made matters worse. As Sunday approached, my anxiety grew. Despite Ruby's attitude, I couldn't shake off the feeling of responsibility. Unable to sleep and torn between my fears and a sense of duty, I decided to keep watch over Ruby's house that night. If I saw any sign of the thief, I planned to call the police. It was a risky move, but I felt compelled to act, hoping to prevent another family from experiencing the violation and loss we had endured. At midnight, I stealthily made my way to Ruby's house, clad entirely in black. I perched myself in a tree nearby, keeping a vigilant eye. Suddenly, I noticed a light turn on in one of the rooms. It was Ruby, emerging from her bathroom. Despite her casual appearance, she still looked stunning, but I quickly refocused on the matter at hand, aware that the thief could arrive at any moment. Concerned for her safety, I attempted to direct message her on Instagram, but she blocked me immediately. Desperate, I climbed up to her balcony and knocked on her window. Ruby was initially shocked and furious at my presence, accusing me of being a maniac. I quickly explained my intent was to protect her from the imminent robbery, revealing what I had overheard during the break-in at my house. Her initial disbelief shifted to concern as I recounted the details. Ruby, now determined, declared that she wouldn't let the robbery happen on her watch, especially since her parents were not home. She took charge, locking down the house and ensuring the security system was activated. Together, we turned off the lights and sat in the dark hallway on the second floor, waiting for the thief to make his move. Ruby's transformation from a seemingly indifferent cheerleader to a courageous and proactive individual took me by surprise. As we waited in silence, the tension was palpable, but there was also a newfound sense of camaraderie between us, two unlikely allies united against a common threat. Equipped with only our cell phones, a mop, and a tennis racket for defense, Ruby and I waited anxiously. Despite the absurdity of our makeshift weapons, we couldn't help but find some humor in the situation. Ruby's excitement, fueled by adrenaline, was contagious, and we found ourselves engaged in conversation, revealing sides of each other that were typically hidden at school. As we talked, I commented on the disparity between her school persona and her current demeanor. She hinted at a more complex story behind her facade, but before she could elaborate, a noise from the kitchen interrupted us. Ruby speculated that the intruder had entered through the back door, heightening our fear. Our hearts raced as we heard footsteps and the distinct ticking of a clock. Suddenly, a masked man emerged from the kitchen, carrying a bag. I was about to call the police, but Ruby stopped me, insisting we observe his actions. The intruder, noticing our presence, began to ascend the stairs, prompting us to hastily hide in a nearby storage room filled with dusty items. In the close confines of the storage room, facing Ruby, I felt an overwhelming impulse to kiss her, given the intimacy and intensity of the moment. However, our attention was quickly diverted as we heard the thief descending the stairs. Ruby, realizing his probable target, exclaimed that he was after her family's million-dollar painting. Her casual reference to such wealth left me astonished. Impulsively, Ruby left the storage room to confront the thief, her actions both brave and reckless. I was torn between admiration for her courage and concern for her safety, wondering why she would risk so much for a painting. Despite the danger, Ruby seemed determined to protect her home and confront the intruder, leaving me in a state of anxiety and awe. "Ruby, come back." I called out in alarm as she recklessly followed the thief into the living room, with me reluctantly in tow. As Ruby boldly confronted the intruder, I'd braced for the worst, expecting our discovery to lead to a dangerous confrontation. To my utter surprise, Ruby addressed the thief as Mr. Palmer, our school janitor. My mind raced with confusion and fear as I turned on my phone's flashlight for a better look. In the stark light, the figure did indeed resemble Mr. Palmer, known and loved by all students for his warmth and kindness. With the room now illuminated, the thief, who was indeed Mr. Palmer, removed his mask. His eyes were filled with tears as Ruby questioned his actions. He revealed a heart-wrenching motive. His daughter was battling cancer, and he desperately needed money for her surgery. The medical expenses were overwhelming, and in his desperation, he had resorted to robbery. As Mr. Palmer recounted his tragic story, including the loss of his son a decade earlier, Ruby and I were moved by his plight. Our initial fear gave way to empathy for the distraught janitor. However, our moment of compassion was interrupted by the sound of police sirens. Ruby's mother had seen the break-in on the security cameras and called the authorities. The police arrived and apprehended Mr. Palmer, who was visibly scared and remorseful. The next day at school, Ruby approached me with a sense of urgency. Determined to help Mr. Palmer's daughter, we brainstormed ways to raise funds. I set up a donation webpage, and together, we visited every classroom, appealing to the students and teachers for contributions. The response was overwhelming. Most of our school community, touched by Mr. Palmer's story, were eager to help. It was a moment that brought our school together, transforming a moment of crisis into one of solidarity and compassion. Following the eventful robbery incident, Ruby and I teamed up to organize a fundraiser to raise additional funds for Mr. Palmer's daughter's surgery. Ruby proved particularly effective, using her charm and influence to persuade even her wealthy parents to contribute. Thanks to these efforts, the surgery was a success, and Mr. Palmer's daughter began her recovery in the hospital. In a turn of empathy and understanding, both Ruby's parents and I decided to drop our charges against Mr. Palmer. He returned the stolen jewelry, and with his remorseful cooperation, he received a reduced sentence of only 6 months in jail. It seemed like life was gradually returning to normal. However, for me, the biggest change was internal. The entire ordeal made me see Ruby in a new light. Her bravery, kindness, and spirited nature during the crisis had only deepened my feelings for her. With the homecoming dance approaching, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to ask her out. Gathering my courage, I approached her in the cafeteria during lunch. As I neared, Ruby greeted me with a beaming smile and stood up, anticipating what I might say. Despite my fears of potential rejection or embarrassment, I asked her to be my date for homecoming. To my delight and relief, she not only agreed but also seemed genuinely honored by the invitation. And then, in front of all her friends, we kissed. It was a moment of triumph and joy, a jackpot moment, as I felt a rush of happiness. Everything we had gone through together seemed to have brought us closer, turning a once distant crush into a budding romance. Homecoming suddenly became an event I eagerly looked forward to, with Ruby by my side.